All right, I think we are live. Back to talk about hobby-related things. Greg,
Awesome.
Eric,
Nice to be here.
yeah. It's been a little while since we last chatted, and I guess there's been a bunch of previews and stuff that have since happened for a whole range of different things. And so I guess we're gonna try and record an episode of the podcast talking about at least some of that, some of the things that we maybe found more interesting.
Nah, yeah, it should be fun. Just back to old standby and talking about our disdain for Games Workshop models.
Disdain's the wrong word, Eric.
Nah, it's true. Constructive and careful criticism.
Yeah, constructive, careful, and repetitive criticism.
Yeah, it's true. Hey, Dave.
Yeah, so I don't
I
know. I
mean,
think were you just about ready to get into
yeah, I think so.
talking about it? Cool. I'm ready.
Yeah, so if we're all ready, I'm just gonna start.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dragged into Turbolasers, a miniature wargaming podcast by the people behind the blog Between the Bolter and Me. This is episode 94, and I'm your host, Eric Wire, and I'm here with my two brothers, Adam Wire
Hey, everybody.
and Greg Wire.
Hey everyone, glad to be here.
Did we miss you, Greg, there?
Your volume was really low, Greg.
Yeah, like I didn't hear anything.
Hey, Fax Grinder.
Is this better?
That's
That's a
much
lot
better.
better.
Okay, so sorry. I was fucking around with things because I tried to use my headphones.
All right, yeah, hey, Fax Grinder. Nice. So I'm just going to start it over again because it didn't really get anywhere.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, starting now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dragged into Turbolasers, a miniature wargaming podcast by the people behind the blog Between the Bolter and Me. This is episode 94, and I'm your host, Eric Wire, and I'm here with my two brothers, Adam Wire
Hey, everybody.
and Greg Wire.
Hey everyone.
Well, nice to all be here together, and for this episode, we wanted to go back to some like kind of older style episodes and just which admittedly we've been doing a bunch of these recently, but we wanted to talk about one of Games Workshop's ever prevalent online preview weekends. And this one in particular happened a week or two ago, and it was dubbed their Summer Skirmish preview, in which they focused just a bunch on all their various skirmish games, from Necromunda to Kill Team to
Blood Bowl.
like Warhammer Underworlds, yeah, Blood Bowl, sort of all their other games that they've sort of
Where
built
was
up over the years.
Titanicus? Where was Aeronauticus Imperialis? They didn't have any of that, right? Maybe
Yeah,
they're
no,
done.
that's
Maybe they're
true.
dead. They're finally dead. They lasted a lot longer than I think anyone anticipated.
Yeah, it's true. And I suspect those will still slowly get updates. But I
Yeah.
feel they did it for most of their, core games. And interestingly, it wasn't a huge focus on like Necromunda, which is I think, one of their bigger skirmish games that has been consistent. With this, I think it was just a Goliath vehicle that I don't know if
Yeah,
we need to
that
go
is actually
into.
interesting. I would say their biggest skirmish game would probably be Necromunda or maybe Mordheim. That's the one everybody loves, but they're not bringing that back now. Um, and so yeah, they just showed another Necromunda Goliath vehicle, like whatever. Not that interested in that.
Yeah, and so the thing we wanted to focus this episode on was talking about the two that sort of stood out the most to us, and that was the Kill Team reveal, which is sort of the next Kill Team box game, which I think is called Into the Dark, which has Kroot of all things, kind of amazingly, as well as some Imperial Navy warriors, and then they revealed one warband from Warhammer Underworlds game, which is actually like a witch hunter warband that was pretty interesting.
So
Of those two things, do we care which we gonna talk about first?
let's start with the kill team stuff, because I feel this, in some regards, it really touched on a lot of things that us and like a lot of other people have been asking for a long time. One, focus on at least one new alien race, and then if it has to be the Imperium, maybe like more of a human element like the Imperial Navy. And
Yeah, just God, no Space Marines.
yeah, and surprisingly they focused on the Imperial Navy and the Kroot, both of which I feel are pretty good choices. Like, I think despite the Kroot not having really received any love for like 20 years, they
Yeah,
still
since
have a
the original.
pretty, yeah, they still have a pretty, I wouldn't say big following, but there are a lot of people that really like them and are still doing conversion projects with them, making whole armies of Kroot based on different
Yeah,
games, a la
like
Siege of Pitch.
modern synthesis, yeah,
Yeah.
and some others are doing the Siege of Pitch thing, which is neat. And yeah, it's cool to see that they did focus on an alien race, one in which that they already had obviously developed a little bit, like we said, but not a ton. And this, gives Games Workshop the opportunity to do a little bit more with them, but not in a huge way, possibly gauge interest, things like that. So I think that was a good choice.
Like, really, the
Um,
last time we saw anything with the Kroot were from the Blackstone Fortress game, where one of the characters was like a Kroot sniper of sorts, and like, I mean, that was very cool. And so this is kind of building on a little bit more of that. And since it's not just a single character model, they could explore that a little more. And I think one of the things that I was sort of excited to see, apparently, at least some of the ideas and concepts behind the Kroot models were concepts that Nikki Grillet had worked on when she was part of Games Workshop.
oh, that's cool.
They mentioned that on Instagram in one of their stories,
Huh.
and so that was
Okay.
kind of fun.
That's really cool.
I don't know. Maybe we
Um,
touch on them first.
yeah, I think they're certainly the coolest, even not looking at like the model quality. They're just cool from the sense that we mentioned, updating a Xenos race and giving it, more depth and interest. Um, for the model sense, I think they only revealed 4 models, and presumably there'll be at least 10 models just based on other kill teams and such, and they
Yeah.
just haven't revealed them. And I must admit, pretty surprised. Like almost all of them, I think, are pretty good.
The only one that I would say that I'm a little disappointed with
The
is
leader.
the leader model, which I'm just gonna call the leader. And a lot of that comes down to their like abysmal posing. Like they're supposed to be in a space hulk or something, and one of their one foot is up on what seems to be like a rock or something. And even that, I could get past that, but them like holding up their rifle in like a victory pose or whatever, that's just not a good pose.
Yeah, it's sort of like
Stupid
too cool for
looking.
school.
Yeah. So I think if they weren't in that dumb victory pose, I'd be mostly fine with it. But the fact that they're standing on a rock and they're holding their rifle up in kind of a nonsensical way is, I guess, to me, is kind of just baffling. Like, I don't really understand how that was
Hmm.
approved. Like, it's sculpted well, like, there's nothing really wrong with that, but, like, it's just not, it
Well,
wasn't put together
being that
well.
this is a kill team and it's clear that, or I guess not 100% clear, but pretty clear that this is just going to be a new kit per se. It's not going to be like an upgrade sprue or something of that nature. They will probably have a bunch of different options for this leader sergeant sort of model, and hopefully some of them have some better weapons
So if we're
or the
lucky,
pose
if we're
changes.
lucky with that, with this pose, they're holding like a really large blade. Maybe they have an option where they're holding up like the heads of a few slain Imperial Navy or whatever. That to me is like the only thing that could kind of make sense with this pose.
Yeah, I guess
And
that's true.
it's possible that would be an option. So I guess I'm sort of holding out hope for that.
I mean, they've made some pretty drastic changes with sort of slot fit together models like this in the past, like the Death Course stuff, that you might be able to do a pretty, like, just a different top half or something based on how the cloak is. And I don't know. But the model's fine, just the pose is kind of bad. But, like, I feel it's still Kroot, and it looks okay.
Yeah, like, it kind of has some fun details. Like, they have this weird little mortar and pestle skull type thing, which is fine.
They're really all legs, man.
They really are all legs. And another thing that I'm a little not that thrilled with, they're holding like a Tau battle rifle. Like, I would rather them explore like their own weapons and technology and stuff. But I will say, I guess, in terms of like GW weapon designs, the Tau battle rifle isn't the worst they could have done. So
yeah, that's true.
It's okay. So yeah, they're pretty good. The pose is bad. Not much more to say from that. They kind of have a little kind of classic looking little leather mask, which is kind of cool.
I mentioned that like the model is sort of all legs, but I think kind of building onto that, they revealed another model that has, I'm just gonna say, a bowcaster for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And they're just standing straight up, also of pretty tall legs. But like to me, this model is great, and it emphasizes how sure they can be really tall, long legs, but there's still like a torso there. There's still like this seems like a sensible anatomy for an alien. It's not like an Eldar that has a waist so thin it is baffling behind armor and things like this. This model has virtually no armor, but it has like a broad chest and hips, and I don't know. I feel like it just looks like it makes sense.
Yeah, the one with the bowcaster thing is leagues nicer than the other model. Like, they're standing up in a believable pose. It actually looks like they're aiming and shooting their weapon. Like, very good.
And
their weapon has a stock. It's big, but it's not like quite as GW big.
And I think because of it's like a simple pose, but it has sort of some nice weight behind it. The model looks powerful, and it's not because they have a cool mask and skulls everywhere and leather tight boots or stuff like that.
Well, so a point that we can bring up. So this model has a very simple, well done pose that actually reads well, and the model has kind of a lot of weight and character. Whereas the Imperial Navy models are in simple poses, but they don't have like that elegance, believability. They kind of just look randomly glued together. Like, this looks very good, and it's in stark contrast to what we'll see with the Imperial Navy models. And it's, if you would compare this one with like one of the Imperial Navy models, it's pretty noticeable how much better this was done. And
yeah, I mean, we can get into that in a bit, but to me it looks like just the caliber of sculptor is just leagues apart. But let's get to that in a
Yeah.
bit.
They have like a little like a thigh mounted pistol, like a flintlock-esque pistol, which is kind of cool. They have
Hmm.
maybe what's like a little bionic eye of sorts, which is cool. So yeah, overall, like, really nice model. I feel GW getting a really good, believable pose that doesn't feel overwrought or forced is pretty rare. Like, they've gotten, I feel, a lot better at it, but um this is very good. And
Well,
I would like to
it's
see more
kind of
like it.
yeah. Well, I feel it's kind of astounding because then the next model they revealed is another model that's just basically
It's
standing
great.
tall, emphasizing how tall they are and imposing. Like one foot is slightly in front of the other, and it's just like surveying the landscape. A hand on its holstered pistol, like
Well, you know what
holding another
the
rifle.
funny thing is? Like, I think they both are using the same body and legs, these two models.
They could
I'm
be
pretty sure they are. And
uh,
but the thing is that I think is so
the
remarkable about that is
well,
with,
maybe.
I think, potentially the same like body and legs, they can still get a very different pose that has a lot of character and is looks really good, but still looks very different from the other model. And it's great. It's another really nice model. Um,
Yeah.
they have kind of the standard Kroot battle rifle. Like, the only thing that I would say with this is the front half of the barrel and stuff. It's too big. It looks kind of stupid, but
It seems like something that probably wouldn't be wildly difficult to just chop off the barrel and such and
mhm.
replace it. I mean, it'll probably be a little hard because with the rest of the rifle is still pretty broad, but I think, it's workable. Hopefully there are a bunch of poses and stuff, and it's if these are indeed the same, that there are others that are similar, and it's not just, oh well, actually the other six are like straddling a rhino or something.
Yeah,
'Cause-
there's a pretty strong chance that a lot of the other, like, I mean, judging by the first model we saw with the dumb victory pose, there's a very good chance a lot of the other models have terrible poses. But I guess at this point, the very least, you could make two models that have restrained, believable, and very neat looking poses.
well, I still am holding out hope that victory pose model will have something that allows it to be. I mean, it's still up on a rock, which would like you'd
It's
have to
stupid.
somehow change that. But at least he's not power metal stance. I mean, it's somewhat approaching that, but it's not quite that bad.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the last model they showed was one of the little crew towns, and I don't even remember if that's what they're called. But
I like this
um,
one. They have a very fun looking face. They very much sort of remind me of like Tremors or something.
mhm. And it's nice to see. I mean, I honestly don't quite remember what the old ones looked like, other than generally this.
I think
And
they had a bigger head.
and they were probably fine cast in metal before
Yeah, I think
that.
they were. Yeah.
So just the fact of having a plastic version that is probably, a little bit better made and such is
Well,
a
I think
welcome
a
thing.
thing that's also funny, this model, if you look at its like leg and arm, like its arm muscles, like, they're very interesting, and they're interesting and they look believable, and they don't look forced, This is in stark contrast with the witch hunter dogs and hounds that we'll look at later. They're not good. This one is good.
Mhm.
But yeah, they're cool. It also looks like maybe on their little harness they're carrying extra ammunition and stuff for the other members. So there's a chance that this little hound will have other like special rules and things that kind of play into at least the game itself.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I think all told, the Kroot, at least from what we see now, is a pretty big win. It's exciting that the Kroot could be explored again, and I mean, it's probably unlikely, but it could be a signal that they may be expanded more in the future or something.
Yeah.
We'll
So
see.
I
Or
think depending on how it's released and how quickly they release the Kroot themselves, particularly if they're as strong as some of these, I could easily see getting a few and doing some conversions and stuff to like tweak their weapons and other stuff like that. I think it would be fun.
Agreed.
So the Kroot overall quite good. And then now the Imperial Navy. These I think it's been something we've talked about a lot, and like I've actually done a few conversions over the years of like Imperial Navy guardsmen and this and such. And so I was excited to see that they were going to explore this a little, and I feel they're a little lukewarm. Like, they're
Yeah.
not terrible, but I feel in terms, all the models they've shown have pretty basic, in many regards, pretty believable poses, but a lot of just the overall proportions of the model, they don't carry the same, like, subtle realism and elegance that we saw with, like, the I'm Standing Here Kroot models we just talked about.
These to me seem like a step backwards. Like they got like C Team to do these, or just didn't give anyone time to work at them. Like these look a lot more like Warlock quality models, which we've railed
At
on
least these ones
for
have
years about
necks.
them.
These models, this model, these
They
all of
do
these
have
models
necks.
have necks, and
That's
well,
true.
their legs and feet, like their feet are massive. They're still not as big as the Orlocks. Their legs have a lot more definition, and you can clearly tell where their joints and stuff are. That was something you couldn't do at all with the Orlocks. But if we look at what I'm just gonna say is like one of the sergeants, they're holding a bolt pistol and they're holding their helmet in their arm. Um, in many regards, a lot of the model I think looks pretty good until you get to the legs, where the legs are again kind of in a power metal pose. That's not as bad as we've sometimes seen, but then I really think like the grav lock boots or whatever they're wearing are so big they throw off kind of like the entire model, and I
There's a
just
lot of
don't
weird
like it.
things of it. I mean, in some sense, maybe because a bunch of the models have these longer suit like thing as tunics, it makes it such that they can't make their stance as wide as they would like to, which I guess is
Mhm.
helpful. But look at their hands are so big and bulky, and the sergeant, her hand is like almost like bent at a complete 90-degree angle to hold her helmet, which looks awkward.
Dare I say the neck is too long?
It might be.
Well, I almost
Some
think
Something
that
about the whole model looks wonky to me.
I
Well, the
think
proportions are just really bad,
yeah,
and
it's heroic scale in a bad
they're
way.
put together in a bad way. And then the fact that they have a bolt pistol that they added extra detail, making it even larger than the standard bolt pistol, doesn't do the model any favors.
Well, I almost think uh looking at her, she's like huge, bulky feet, which I mean, let's say it's metal boots, whatnot. but then the legs are still pretty stocky and thick, but then it cinches into a really tight waist, which is somewhat at odds at the like huge bulky arms and then gigantic hands and bigger weapons. Like it really goes back to like I don't know, early 2000 heroic scale type stuff that Games Workshop had done. And that's saying nothing about the shotguns that these models have.
One thing before we get to like some of the other dumb weapons, to me it also looks like the arms themselves are seated too far away from the body. So they kind of have a lot of the classic bad Space Marine problems and like Terminator problems. Then on top of that, this one has like what looks to be a dueling saber, but there's just no way for them to get that realistically placed on the model, so it's like they just pasted it on there and it doesn't look right. But yeah, Eric, you were mentioning, so if you look at some of the other models, they have their classic combat shotguns, and Games Workshop has designed and redesigned the combat shotguns maybe more than any weapon aside from the bolter, and dare I say,
I think they just get worse and worse.
Dare I say, each time they do it, it gets worse. The only time they ever designed shotguns that didn't look horrendous were probably on the Gene Stealer cultists. Because they like designed and made like 8, like at least 4 or 5 different ones, and they were all pretty good.
Can you go to the one that doesn't have the shield? Because I want to talk about an aspect of the design on this.
Yeah.
You see towards the back of the gun the thing that looks like a forward assist from an AR. What do you think that is?
I think that's a shotgun shell being ejected from the weapon.
Is that what we think it is?
I think that's
Probably.
what that is. Because, wait a minute.
I think that's what it is.
Why would it be ejected if they're running like that?
Oh, and also the pump.
They're running to the next target.
Like it would have been. I guess they're pumping.
They're like
it
pumping it back
okay.
to release the one shell. So, but the thing is, like, they could have posed this model to really make it look like they're ejecting one of the shells, but the pose is so cumbersome and clumsy, you can't even tell what's going on. So, like, that in itself.
Well, and that's just because everything's like the arms and hands are so fat, the legs are so fat. The only thing that isn't fat and bulky is the waist. And
yeah, so
because of that, because the waist is pretty thin, it just like nothing works. It's so different from the Kroot models we were just talking about.
There's since everything's so bulky and clumsy, there's literally no room for like subtlety in poses, and because like a lot of just small shifts and twists like do a whole lot to sell a pose and like show like power and believability, and literally all of that is lost on these models. Like to the point where
bad,
we were having a discussion like what's even going on with the model.
I think you're right that he's pumping it to eject the spent shell. But at first I thought that maybe they like, let's look at standard weapon designs like an AR-15, and like there's this forward assist thing on it. We don't know what that is. Let's just put something like that on this gun. At first I thought maybe that's what they were doing.
Yeah, I don't think so. But actually, like, we have to talk more about this shotgun in the sense that
there are 2 shotgun designs on display here. There's the one
both
the single barrel and the double barrel.
They're like inconceivably bad. Like, I feel this design was probably a Goodwin design from, I don't know, in the early 90s with Necromunda and some of those things with the the
Mhm.
arbites and stuff that was still big and kind of stupid, but like okay, kind of classic. But then they kept redesigning it for like the Space Marine Scouts and different things, and each time they somehow get bigger and more cumbersome. Like, what the fuck? Like, this doesn't look like anything.
When on top of that, if that is a shotgun shell coming out of the weapon, which we're pretty sure it is, right? That in itself also gives you a sense, like, so if the rounds are that big, like, you could fit maybe
Like five,
five
five
or
at the
something in
most.
them. Like,
But even if you
why?
did that, it's still all wasted metal space.
Like, yeah, it's just inconceivable how they would design a weapon this big to
So
hold like
poorly.
5 rounds. Like, it makes literally no sense. They would never, even in this dark age of technology, they would never be walking around with something so poorly conceived.
I think it may be the worst like Imperial weapon ever made.
Well, weren't we very recently? Oh wait, shit. The
I can't. Well,
the
actually, the
Black
worst
Templar
is the second
neophytes.
shotgun.
The Black Templar neophytes had redesigned shotguns too that we
That were
not
so
long
bad.
ago talked about how they were horrendous. These, I think, are even worse. And
And didn't the kind of RBTs like models for Necromunda, the Palatine Spire Guard or something, weren't their shotguns kind of neat?
yeah, they were pretty good. All of their
Like,
weapons were pretty good.
I just can't conceive, like, just looking at everything about this striding forward model is cumbersome and like face palm, but like the weapon just takes it like just through the roof, like
Yeah, it takes it to
comical,
another
like it's a
level.
joke. But then they have they up the ante and make an even more ridiculous weapon with like I'm just gonna say an over under double barreled shotgun that is so ridiculous. I, I
It still has the pump. It almost looks like it has a lever action thing. Like, it's not clear where you'd put other rounds in the shotgun. It sort of looks like it has a separate ejection port for each barrel. Um I don't
There's not space for the shotgun shells for each barrel. Like
know.
looking at it, usually with these sorts of shotguns, directly below the barrel is a tube that you have all of the shells.
Yeah.
And I mean, they even have that tube on this double barreled thing, the thing at the bottom. So that's where you'd fit the shells in. But I don't
there's no
know,
conceivable way that that could work.
or how I don't know how a mechanism would exist where it would take the rounds from
Yeah.
that tube and get one into each of those barrels.
And how the hell
Like
would this person even hold this? They're holding a breaching shield that is so massive. I guess it must just have a
it looks like
anti-grab
the
thing.
pumping thing is built into the shield such that you just push against the shield
Yeah,
to pump it.
I
Um,
think so.
I think that is the
that I
intent.
think that's the
Um,
idea.
but the over and under shotguns like that, like you open the breach and physically put in each round.
Yeah.
'Cause
So it's not a
isn't
fast.
there isn't really another way to do it that I could think of.
Mm-hmm. Like this model astounds me, and I think maybe the what is most disappointing. Well, one thing it's disappointing that like they're making Imperial Navy like these like void armored dudes like that's awesome like I love those Jess Goodwin concepts and then you think of because didn't Forge World make a couple I think
Yeah, they
Simon
were
Egan made a
cool.
few
Yeah, they
and
were
it's like
cool.
wow they're so cool like just make them in plastic and this will be like I need to have these but they instead made something so bad that I don't even think these can be used in conversions. They're so
You could
bad.
use their helmets. Their helmets
Yeah,
are cool, and they're sized okay. Like,
but I don't think they're as cool as the old Goodwin designs. I'm
no,
I
they
just
were
feel
certainly
astounded.
based off of those, though.
people could take that shield and do something neat with it. I think.
Yeah, I don't. I'm just astounded that they're so.
I think literally the only thing you could take from these are the helmets. That's it. Yeah, they're
Yeah, I just
remarkably
can't
bad.
believe how bad they are.
I think the shield one, the standing legs, you could probably take those legs, cut them, and like put them a little bit closer together. And those I think look all right. They look less awkward than the legs on some of the other ones.
I mean,
Perhaps just
that's
because they're
sort of
standing
true.
up.
I think that is true, but then that sort of begs the question, why wouldn't you just take the helmet and, like, even a Gene Stealer cultist that still have bulky, like, suit armor and just use that because they're better. They look
Yeah.
better, their poses are better. They still suffer from a lot of the same problems, like their feet are too big, but they're not this big. And again, if you want shotguns, just use the Gene Stealer cultist shotguns that are way better. They mostly actually make sense. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I just can't.
they're bad.
I
They're really
can't
bad.
can't really fathom how they bumbled this so incredibly.
Yeah, it's bad. And I think it really, if you look at them side by side with some of the Kroot models, it really shows you how you can do a simple pose very well and get a lot of character and interest in it, and how you can do a similar thing and just really botch it.
Yeah, astounding. Just astounding.
Yeah, so I don't know. I guess one thing that I will say, they managed to make another kill team box or like another skirmish box where you just couldn't buy it because at least one half of the box is horrible. Like the last Necromunda release, like those Orlock things, awful. You just couldn't
Hmm.
buy it. So the same thing's true here. But I guess I will say this might end up being the first of the new kill team boxes where maybe both factions are entirely new sculpts.
That's true.
So that's
Maybe if
good.
it has some terrain or something that is interesting for making nice space hawks, it could be useful.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll wait to see some of the other models, but the Imperial Navy they're not Orlock
Such a
bad,
disappointment.
but they're pretty bad.
They're surprisingly close to that when normally I think Kill Team is something where they sort of bring out the A team for sculpting and stuff, but
I think
wow.
in the defense of the Imperial Navy stuff, I don't think they're not even close to as bad as the Orlocks. They really aren't.
Yeah,
So there's at least that, but they're not good.
part of maybe my anger it is just such huge disappointment because I like the old Jess Goodwin designs and they've already had some great models of them, like we said, Simon
Yeah.
Egan's Forge World stuff, that it seemed like, oh yeah, just like make sort of recreate them digitally, but they decide to like kind of redesign them a little bit, but do it worse.
Bigger
Well,
and
I don't
better
know.
in every way.
Maybe we just
Yeah, I think we're done
maybe
with
we
this.
just move on.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess that's Kill Team. So some great, some like surprisingly bad,
Mhm.
even for Games Workshop. But the next thing I was hoping to talk about a little bit is, I guess, the next, I'm gonna say, season of Underworlds, which I think is called Nethermaze. And for this, they revealed one of the warbands, which is actually a witch hunter warband. So kind of coming up on the heels of some of the witch hunter models from that Warhammer Quest game and the set of special characters that everyone kind of liked. They actually just made a small warband of witch hunters that use some of the same, I don't know, imagery and whatnot. And this is kind of a mixed bag for me, but
Yeah, I think
looking at them, it stands out, and why I think some people in this sort of Inc. 28 sort of community might generally be excited about them is just because this gives a host of new models that would, without too much work, would fit quite nicely into Mordheim, which is cool.
the biggest thing that I would say is if you want some cool witch hunter models to use in conversions, I think you would just be better served to buy those two special characters that they've released before.
Hmm.
The male and the female one, the one with big crossbow and whatnot. They're posed better. The detailing is better. I would just put your money there. But I
I think a
think
lot of the stuff in this is fairly good. Like the leader dude, the pistols that he's holding, wow, they are big. Like the bore of the guns looks reasonable. Like
no,
I
yeah,
think
these are
they're pretty
good
good. His
flintlock
face is
pistols.
good, his body, his hand size is pretty good. His pose is okay. He's at least not standing on a thing. Like I think the leader is quite good.
Yeah,
I
The
think
stakes that he has, while sort of large, are still fairly reasonable.
I
yeah,
think what stands out to me that I agree with all you're saying though, but in a general sense, these models like look like they've taken elements from that first witch hunter from the um
Warhammer Quest.
Warhammer Quest thing and took design elements that they had in there and it's like all witch hunters use this for
Yeah,
worse.
like
The most notable thing is like just some of his stupid armor. Like he has these heavy metal shin guards and shoulder pads. Like
I think the shin guards
no.
are particularly stupid. I certainly remember when they showed those Warhammer Quest models. Like the Witch Hunter dude is pretty cool looking, but like the Shin armor design, we complained then about it looked pretty stupid. But in my mind, just having one model that for whatever reason that's how they design their armor, that's fine. But for them to essentially use that same design again on another model, that now is kind of calling into question like that is really their.
Like everyone does this for some reason.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't like that at
His
all.
pistols could have been like bolt shooting crossbow pistols or something. Like they could have
Yeah.
been terrible.
I think the leader
That's
is a
all.
good model. I think the only thing that I would say is well, one thing I never really like fire stuff, but that's whatever. Pretty easy to
It
change.
would be easy to
I'm
disable.
But
sure
yeah,
they'll have
just
an option to have him holding another pistol or a sword.
possibly, although they normally don't do that for Underworld stuff because they want it like easy to assemble type stuff
That's
since it's a
fair.
board game. But I don't
I
know.
will say, despite his dumb looking shin armor, the boots they have are actually relatively well sized. They're pretty
Yeah,
good.
generally I like him.
He's good.
Yeah, he's good, but could be a little better. But as is all things, they then have like a really hulking ogreish brute character
I
that
think he looks good too.
yeah I like him. I mean, he's maybe a little bit like overly large, huge feet type stuff, but I think that just fits. Like this is not a normal human being. This is sort of ogreish giant territory that how
I
he
think
got this big, who knows? Maybe
the leather around his boots, that
looks good.
texturing looks good. The axe, while big, like the head looks fairly thin
Looks like
and
a
Hmm.
handle.
fireman's axe, like a modern.
Yeah. Like
And
I
even
think
his
he's
armor,
good.
like I like his armor. It seems like armor that he could conceivably have, and they don't have like sharp, cool, angled shin
Also,
armor or
like, I feel
something.
this armor is actually pretty similar to the armor that, like, the other leader witch hunter has. And whereas that kind of looks wrong and fake, this actually fits relatively well with this model. And again,
Yeah, I
part of
think it's
that
my
is
favorite
they
of the
just
models.
don't have the dumb shin armor. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
they're
it's
pretty good.
cool. I think this is one that we could like port almost immediately like into Mordheim for a
Oh yeah.
warband, like either
Yeah.
like a witch hunter themed ogre or whatnot. I think would work really well. He's cool.
Yeah.
Because then there is one with a crossbow, which doesn't look
I
too bad.
He
Unfortunately,
looks
the
cool.
crossbow is
The
like a
crossbow,
bomb bolt type thing, which
yeah, which is really stupid. But I
yeah.
feel you could like very easily make it not shooting a bolt with a bomb on it,
Is it just
Hmm.
and it
me,
would be
or does
fine.
this model, like, to me, it just screams movie Lord of the Rings orc?
Yeah.
Like, all that armor, that's what the orc armor looked like. That face mask, that's what the orc armor looked like. Even the kind of weird overwrought crossbows, that's this. So to me,
I
this is
I
think
could
the
see
a
that.
wholly unoriginal design that I think overall works, but it still sort of has me scratching my head a little
I
bit.
think he has just too much like battered metal armor that doesn't looks kind of cool, but it's like almost too much and makes the model just seem very generic and like you kind of can't tell what's going on. There's no like definition, like it doesn't emphasize or strengthen the model. It's just sort of there.
I think he's well sculpted though. Like the folds in his hand, the glove there look
Hmm.
good, and I think the crossbow, like it's not overly big.
Yeah,
Like
Yeah, it's
you
good.
could you could cut off the
his
bottom
hands
part.
are, but
His hands are fairly big.
They're
And even
huge.
though he's standing up on the rock, feel like it doesn't look terrible with the pose
it's
he's
kind of
in.
like a maybe a fallen over pillar or something. Like this is something that seems like it could make sense with the setting that the game is in, and this
Yeah.
looks fine. Like this is I
It's
And
feel
I
like the best you could do
feel
that
it
type of thing.
fits with him, like kind of like stepping up on a thing and aiming. Like it seems reasonable,
and I
not
think
not bad.
if they ever make a model where they're putting their foot up on something, it works a lot better when like a significant portion of the base is what they're standing up on. It's not that they're just standing up on a small rock. Like, you would never do that because you just like lose your balance or something. In this case, he's like moving up over like a fallen pillar or something. Like, this is fine.
It looks like a
Hmm.
believable movement. We'll next go to a model that also is standing up on a pillar thing and looks less good.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
this
this they did it wrong.
yeah, this they fucked it pretty bad.
Well, so but up until this point, the three models we talked about, I think are quite good.
Yeah.
This model, like
Oh boy.
it's perched up on a rock in a way that like you would just never do. And the sad thing about it is, other than that weird pose, like it's kind of good. And the pose could even work pretty well if they just like pushed that leg down and didn't have
Yeah,
that rock. It
I I don't like how fairly well endowed they are.
yeah, it doesn't make a
um
whole lot of sense.
well,
I
I
don't
think
like that pistol at all.
It could be a lot bigger though. The four-barreled thing.
like overall the weapons are fine. I think they're a little too big, but for a GW weapon, they're actually okay. I think this model just falls flat because of the legs. They're just not posed well. They're also way too bulky. that like you kind of lose a lot of like any subtlety of posing or any of
Or
that. Like,
power in that pose,
yeah,
yeah.
you just can't tell because it's so
I hate
clumsy looking.
this model. I
It's
hate
bad.
it.
So this is, I think, would
But
be a model that
it's
you couldn't salvage it. At least not the
yeah.
lower half of it.
But this isn't the worst model in the set.
Yeah, surprisingly, it's
It
not the
just keeps
worst.
getting worse. It started out great. Started out great. Well, so now we move to, I guess these are supposed to be hounds or something.
And like this,
GW has a long track record of seemingly being unable to sculpt wolves and dogs and cat-like creatures. They have a handful that are good. Like they made the little Doberman from the one Kill
oh yeah,
Team
that was
Walks
very
game
good.
that everyone loved, and like for good reason. It was a good looking doggo that wasn't it looked good. Like it actually looked like a real dog.
And to me, the fact that they have two dogs seems like this is almost like screaming like, "Hey, Mordheim players, we see you out there. Like we're going to release something that you can use. It's not for Mordheim, but like wink wink because those
Yeah.
were some of the warbands that you would have and like there wasn't a good option other than probably just getting historical miniatures. You could find stuff. But these they released two of them and like god they're terrible and like they don't look like anything. Like the one of them kind of looks like a cat and a dog,
And
and
kind of a rat.
I think the facial structure, particularly of the darker one, looks like a cat to me.
I kind of wonder if
And a
they're
monkey
almost
and kind of a rat. Like
I think they're maybe leaning into like, oh god, we don't know how to sculpt a dog. And like, well, let's just lean into like this is Age of Sigmar. There are weird creatures in it. It's like horses aren't horses, they have bird heads. Like type shit. And just use this as an excuse to have a horrible looking
yeah, they're bad.
canine like creature.
They're really bad. Like I would feel
Like you
like if you
couldn't use
bought
this.
this box, like best course of action is to throw the dog in the bin, both of them, and keep their nice scenic bases for other models. There's
You like
nothing
almost
else you could
like
do with them.
burn the models.
Melt down the plastic, or take that plastic and get a bottle of like
Tamiya
thin
cement.
cement, cut that plastic of the dog up into little pieces, put it in the cement, and make like a little sprue glue type shit to fill seams in or something. There's not
Yeah,
much
holy
else you could
god,
do
are
with
they
that.
bad? But
Yeah.
all things considered, though, this because they'll probably eventually release the warband separately, and if it's like before, I think they're like $35 for a warband or something. Like that's not expensive, even if you only want two or three of the models. Like that's good. So,
Yeah, I
um,
think it'll be well loved by a lot of hobbyists. I still would make the argument if you're wanting to like make some cool witch hunter models is to just buy those other two special characters because they're posed a lot better. They don't have some of the dumb armor detailing as these, and we'll have to wait and see how these models go together. But those other witch hunter characters, they were cut in a way that a lot of their bolsters and other detailing, they were cut in such a way that you don't need to glue that on, and you don't have to resculpt other areas and attachment points. So like
mhm.
beautifully done. We don't know quite how these models are gonna work like, and there's a chance they'll be the same, but I would imagine they probably will be a little closer to like the push fit models.
Mhm.
So yeah, they're pretty good. Um, the dogs are terrible, or if they're dogs, like, yeah, they probably will have a really like asinine and stupid name where they're really trying to say like these aren't just any dogs, these are
Yeah.
um which I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah. No, I ultimately it's a good thing. Hopefully the other warband in here is also cool, but um I'm excited to see what people do, particularly in line with Mordheim, because I think people will be able to do cool stuff with that.
Yeah.
Um well, I guess with that in mind, I feel we talked about the two major reveals and kind of what we thought was good and bad about them.
Mm-hmm.
Do we think we want to maybe just wrap this up? Any last sort of words or thoughts before that?
Yeah, I think we can wrap things up. I guess sort of to touch on one of the main points we talked about before. Those Kroot, not the leader, but the ones just standing there have really nice, subtle, believable, and powerful poses that tell you a lot. That's what Games Workshop needs to strive to do more of. Um, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not convinced they will. We'll see. We'll
No,
see.
yeah, agreed. Agreed. Yeah, I guess, well, with that, thanks everybody for listening, and we will talk to you again soon.
Until next time, everybody.
Yep, see ya. All right, we recorded it. Good job, everybody.
We did it.
Yep.
Probably in the future, we can probably talk a little bit more about some of the other stuff. Like, I know for Warcry, there are a whole bunch of new models that are pretty interesting looking. I don't know if I really love any of them, but
Yeah,
they're interesting.
I don't think they are as kind of inspired or interesting as some of the original Warcry
No, but
warbands. I mean,
they're
at least they're
interesting.
kind of working and doing different new things, which is fun. But I don't, nothing stands out particularly cool. I don't think.
Yeah, I agree. Also, we talked a lot about the dumb weapons for the Imperial Navy. I guess we could talk a little bit about some of the stuff that I've been working on recently with
Mm-hmm.
like converting and modifying weapons. So I finally started to do some work on one of the new Horus Heresy Marines, mainly just thinking it would be a good excuse to convert another smaller bolter for one of the Marines just to play around with it and see like what I could do with it. So
Mm-hmm.
I've almost finished converting one of the bolters, and I guess managed to make a pretty large rifle, but I think I improved the design like quite a bit. And it again, the weapon like has a stock. The barrel's much smaller. The magazine makes a little more sense. It actually has front and rear sights, so kind of a lot of the things that we
Agreed.
always
It
talk
looks a lot
about.
better. It looks a
Um,
lot better.
and so it's been kind of fun. The one thing is when I was making this, like when it was mostly done, I feel like I like the overall look of it, but I still sort of feel like I could make I could make smaller weapons, and like that wouldn't be bad. So I don't know. We'll
Mm-hmm.
see based on how much time I have, but like maybe I'll eventually make another weapon that's even smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I think that could be
but
cool.
I did
Actually, I'll be right
compare.
back.
Yeah, I did compare the weapon with another smaller bolter that I converted a while ago, where I used one of the Primaris heavy bolt pistols, and I used one of those heavy bolt pistols to convert a bolter, and this newer one is actually quite a bit smaller, but still pretty long. Oh, unsupervised darkness. It says that trigger figure looks a bit long. Yeah, so that I feel it's really easy to make trigger fingers and stuff way too long. And I think in this case it is too long. And um that might be something I actually go back in and maybe resculpt to try and make it a little better. But yeah, it's too long. It's not horrendous, but yeah, it's not right. And then if we look at just some of the other Space Marine weapons, so like here's a picture of the converted bolter, and then above that is one of the non-converted versions, and then on top of that is what may be one of the worst bolter designs they've come up with yet, the heavy bolt rifle. So yeah, there's a pretty wide range of designs. Like with this one that I converted now, I sort of took some inspirations from like the pulse rifles and stuff that the Marines used in Aliens, which, I mean, those rifles, they just piece together a bunch of different guns to make what they deem to be like a futuristic, bulky weapon. And so this, I sort of feel, has some of those design elements, which I sort of like. But
It
yeah, I
reminds
think
me of like an AK-47 design.
it does kind of look like that too. That it is sort of funny that this bolter in particular was one of the ones that I decided to use this one here because I didn't think I would have to rework the trigger finger because they actually had trigger control, but it is sort of funny to think that ideally I should probably redo that finger because it's a little too it's a little too long. Yeah, so unsupervised darkness. Yeah, so that's something with like pretty much all of GW weapon designs. As they continue to design them, they like make them almost like taller and taller and taller, or essentially conceivably almost no reason. Because like all of that extra material isn't seemingly serving any function other than making the weapon more cumbersome and difficult to like actually use. So like for pretty much all of these conversions that I do, like we'll make little tutorials that we'll show on our blog and Instagram. Like the first thing you do on all of the conversions is just find a guideline on the weapon and just like cut off like the top half of it
You
and then
cut it
give it
all
a new
off.
barrel. So that's essentially what you need to do with every weapon. And for most of the bolters, like the first thing you should just do is look at them, find the forward grip on the weapon, and then just cut everything above that forward grip, just cut it all off. And then replace the barrel, and you've pretty much done most of the work you need to do. And then the main things you would do is, depending on how detail oriented you were, you could add like front and rear sights, and then if you're really going all in, you could give it a stock. the problem with a lot of the designs, there's not a lot of room to add a stock. Though
Yeah,
a lot
to
of
fit.
these Horus Heresy Marines, they're a little better in that. Like this model in itself, the pose that you're supposed to glue them together, and there's actually enough room for the stock.
That's pretty astounding and
Though, mind you, it's a
well,
relatively small stock, but I didn't have to do a lot of extra cutting and fitting to get it to like actually fit in there.
mhm. That's nice.
Um, so, and also one other thing that if we look at the little picture where you see like three of them with the bolt rifle, the actual bolter that they give you with the Marines, when you cut off the top half, the little rear piece the rear piece above, like at the very top of the weapon, that little rear piece, it kind of looks like what a rear sight would
Mhm.
look like. I literally just cut that off of the top and re-glued that on the back of the weapon and cut a little channel in it to be the rear sight.
Hmm. Yeah, that's
So that
cool.
worked quite well.
Yeah, wow, their just weapons are so large. It's stupid.
Yeah, and also we talked and made fun about like those.
And these are even better than a lot.
Yeah, that's the funny thing is. Well, so like you can see here, like if we actually go back and look at those like Imperial Navy like shotguns that we were making fun of so much. Can I find them? Like there's, yeah, like if you look at that, they're just so tall, and nearly all of that extra space isn't doing anything for the weapon. It's just extra bulk that would be heavier, and even if it was really light, there's just so much mass there that it would be so cumbersome to do anything with it.
Yeah, you just wouldn't. It just
Bad.
such bad design.
It's bad. Um so yeah, so that's what I've been working on. We'll probably have like a little tutorial coming out within the next day or so where we'll have little step-by-step, relatively simple instructions about how I went about the conversion. So if you're at all interested in trying to do a similar thing, maybe it'll give you some inspiration and ideas about how to
Yeah.
go
I'll
about
probably
it.
also try to put it up on Instagram. It'll be a little harder because like there are a lot of images, so I'll have to like really pick and choose.
Yeah.
Just because there's a limit of I think 10, which will make it
Mhm.
a little harder, but
So I guess
I'll
the
do
the
something.
main thing is for almost all of GW weapons, you can roughly cut off the top half of the weapon and replace the barrel, and you're kind of good to go. Particularly if you don't care that much about giving them stocks.
Mhm.
um, but if you do want to convert stocks and stuff for your models, a lot of the plastic Glock weapons have relatively nice looking stocks that you can kind of cut apart to use for various conversions and stocks, and that's what I've tended to do a lot.
Mhm.
So we can for Instagram, like we could potentially have multiple images, multiple things per image. I guess we'll have to experiment with it. Certainly in the blog post, we'll probably have different crops with several pictures per image to show different aspects of the work.
Speak of the devil, the blog post is up. You can bring it up.
Oh, is it up? Cool.
Yeah, I just as we spoke, I was
Amazing.
putting it up. I think it's up. Just to make sure it looks okay.
Okay.
And there
yeah,
weren't
so
errors and stuff.
yeah, so if you look at step number 1, you essentially just take one of the little razor saws, cut off roughly the top half of the weapon, spend a little bit more time cutting off the barrel. This one was like a little more complicated. It's like I drilled a hole for the new barrel, but then wanted to like cut off a little bit more of the front of the weapon to give it kind of a little more visual interest. So after drilling the barrel hole, we cut off a little more of the top and then slotted in the little barrels.
Yeah.
But here you can sort of see, like, once I changed the barrels, you can tell, like, the size of the magazine is huge. So, like, it sort of necessitated cutting off, making the magazine a little smaller, because, like, if we had kept it like that, the necked rounds for the weapon, like, they're so massive. Yeah. And yeah, just about all of the Deloc weapons have pretty nice looking little stalks that you can cut out different parts of them to make nice looking stalks for other weapons. Yeah, so I'm pretty happy with it overall. And I guess eventually I'm gonna finish assembling the model, and maybe I'll give it to you to add to your Dark Angels.
Yeah.
Oh, one other thing that I think is a little funny. While I've been working on assembling the Marine to hold the bolter, while doing that, I spent a little bit of time looking at the holstered bolt pistols they gave you, and there's something else. Like, here I have a picture where we're looking at the Marine, one of the holstered bolt pistols, and another one where I cut it down. And the one where I cut it down, it's still probably too big. But at least now, if you glued it to the side of the Marine, it would look okay. The official ones they give you, like, holy shit, like, it's almost as broad as the Marine's torso, like his whole body. And they want you to glue that to the model's waist? Like, holy shit. I don't understand how they thought that looked okay.
Yeah, I don't know. They just didn't think about it. I don't know.
And, like, but the thing is, like, it's a pretty nice looking holstered pistol. It's just if they maybe made it a third of the size that it is, it would look good. It would be good. But
yeah.
and the other
And
thing
like the
that's
thing
fun,
is, they're all digitally sculpted. It wouldn't even be hard.
yeah, they could easily resize it and make it 2 to 3 times smaller. And then if you did that, there would actually be room to glue it to your models. Like, as it is now, with it that big, it almost doesn't even fit on the model. So I don't know what they were doing.
But that's what you want. That's what makes a cool model, Adam.
Yeah, I don't know. So weird. really weird. But I've toyed around with the idea of also trying to make little tutorials about taking different holstered GW pistols and doing a similar thing. They would be much shorter and easier tutorials, but like in this case, it was literally just use a razor saw and cut off different portions of the holster and then just kind of reshape some of the edges such that it looks okay. So that's something to consider. Like, they'd be very short things, but if anything, it might almost be worth doing, really, because it would just be another way to kind of emphasize and like get other hobbyists and people to realize, you know what, like, they do look better when they're smaller, and it's not really that hard to change it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, we'll see. It could be, like, we could do it. If people would be interested in that. But again, most of it is just cut off like a quarter to a half of it, and then, like, reshape some of the edges, and you're done. But, yeah.
Trying to find all the images to make this Instagram post about it. They're kind of a pain.
Instagram is a pain to post anything, particularly if they're not photos you just took from your phone.
Feel like I should go to bed, everybody.
Yeah. I think in general, we can probably call the stream to a close. Like, we recorded an episode of the podcast, and we spent a little bit of time talking about what I've been working on. And I guess if you want, if you so choose, you could go and read about the little bolter conversion on the blog to get a better idea of how we went about it.
Yeah.
Well, alright everybody, thanks for joining us tonight. It was fun. Thanks for your questions and comments. Thanks for listening in general. Stay safe, stay healthy, keep on enjoying the hobby, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah,
Till next time.
everybody.
Over and out.
Yep. See ya.